Testing once, testing twice. Once, testing twice. That looks pretty live. Just waiting for my computer. The deleted interview of Fabiano Caruana. Planning to check that out at some point. Yes. How does YouTube know? They must have a brilliant algorithm on me. Oh my god, my computer is just dead. I know that's not promising. Computer seems completely dead. Just trying to open the chat room on YouTube. Looks like I've been streaming for a minute and 53 seconds just to open the YouTube chat. Wow. So I'm guessing that if there weren't enough people to run the Friday Night Fights tournament, there's not going to be a ton of people hanging out in chat today. But, streaming's on the schedule, so I'm not going to pass up my chance to spend some time with the Fun Dojo folks and with a fun game called chess. So we're going to stream something anyway. I've been thinking of checking out the Aronian versus Niemann match from the Chess 960 event in Las Vegas this past week. And then maybe playing some chess myself. You can't hear me. Well, that's weird. So my thing thinks it's on, but let's check some more. That's audio properties. No, that's way too advanced. I could turn it up some. See what that does. Dabo seems to be able to hear me. Hi, Dabo. Hi, Bitazo. Hi, Eamon. Maybe it was a little bit too quiet. Is this more medium or normal? Hopefully not so loud to blast any socks off now. As to why it was canceled, the tournaments got canceled when not enough people joined them. So maybe this is an evening where folks are out on the town or something. I don't know. I don't know all the rhythms of life, but some nights we've got a lot of people, and some nights we've got a few people, and occasionally there's nobody. So, yeah. Is the sound okay? Should I make it louder or quieter, or leave it like so? Sounds okay for Batazo. Let me check something. If I did this and then turned off this board view and turned on this board view, nailed it. Well, that's lucky. Very rare for something to just work so nicely without a bunch of struggle. See if I can remove 3 pixels without getting into a battle. here. 10-second chess, huh? Whew. All right, so let's go chess.com. And what do we want? We want to watch events. Really, 10-second chess? Incredible. Freestyle Chess Grand Slam. Oh, I could still book tickets to Las Vegas. Games. Looks like the finals were only 2 games. And they started with 30 minutes. That's a random amount of time. Okay. Earlier in the event, they were playing 10-minute chess. Wow. 30-minute chess. Okay, let's have a look at this. Should be some interesting games then. So, 2 bishops pointed towards the king side. I imagine they're forcing this board style, so I can't do anything about it. 2 bishops pointing towards the king side. C4 and C5 look like likely moves. But white kicked it off with D4. So then we're going to get like D5, C3 probably. So it'll be less combative. You start with C4, C5. That's not super combative either. Yeah. Hey, Dylan, isn't the Tarrasch something that Blacks plays? Like, Black's the one playing the Tarrasch, so White needs a line against it? Same colored knights, meaning early on White's naturally going to have a lot of control over light squares when these knights pop out. And Black will have control of dark squares. In that sense, White's choice to play D4 is the more aggressive central move, because you can follow up with knights fighting for D5 and F5, but you can't defend this pawn with your own knights. What's that? In our room?
Yes, she decided she was going to get out of bed and look for you, and I said, if you get out of bed, I'm going to put you in the room.
Yeah, okay.
And she said, okay. And then she walked to the room and went in her bed, and I put her in the crib, and she was in.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay, so if White wanted to do something aggressive here, what strikes me as most classically aggressive would be like knight here, attacking the pawn, setting up C4. But it feels a little bit loose. I'm not sure that's good just because it puts pressure. Oh, okay, when White plays the Tarrasch against Black's French, gotcha. You don't see anything? Okay, so my OBS is just on the fritz. Thanks for warning me, Dabo. Nothing ever works. I was totally right that there was no way that anything would work. First rank. Okay. So, yeah, so basically I was discussing that if white wanted to break the symmetry, you could use the knight placement to attack the light squares, right? And if your opponent defends it, then you could play c4. But I'm not convinced this is particularly great for white, since it's hard for white to protect the d-pawn at the end. On d4, the knight on c4 seems loose. And so that's why I was saying, just because we're putting pressure doesn't necessarily mean the position is good for white. Let's say black played knight e6, maybe just ignoring this pawn, and you take, and then black puts the knight here. Not even clear how white gets this knight out of their face. It's not smooth to bring out the queen. The knight on e3 is blocking that bishop. If white takes here, black gets another tempo. It definitely looks like black has white at this point. So just because you break symmetry, just because you get pressure, doesn't mean what you're doing is actually good or works, right? And you can compare that to in standard chess, like the King's Gambit for white puts more pressure in a certain sense than the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game, right? But it just doesn't quite work, partly because of some looseness around the move. So putting pressure is not always correct in every position at every time, even for white. Is it desirable for white to put pressure? Do a lot of players with white think about whether or not they can put pressure? I think so. I think it's desirable. But that doesn't mean that it always works. So you can look at it and then sometimes decide not to go for it. Now here after c3, white might even have an idea of playing bishop f4, which could be awkward here. Black could harass the bishop with knight e6 or something, but black immediately plays copycat to ensure this bishop gets this diagonal smoothly here. And Hans plays f4, allowing the queen to get in on the game. I guess, again, to me, the more aggressive-looking move would be e4. Again, I don't know if it's any good. It doesn't look as bad as that knight e3 c4 line I played. Like, it might not be anything especially good, but it doesn't look especially bad either. If we tried to build an amazing center with something like f3 while also connecting our queen, I feel that e5 from black, the f3 move is, on the one hand, from chess, our instincts are the move doesn't look good. It's not developing enough. We're not getting a center out of it. On the other hand, if all it ever does is let your queen come to f2 instead of sitting on its starting square, it might already be fine, honestly. This might be fine for white. Maybe you can just play queen f2. Yeah. Okay, so I think f3 might also be playable. Magnus definitely likes to play e4 if he can in these positions. So I agree that's plausible. But let's say he would at least think about it. We don't know for sure if he would play it. It's not totally clear how good it is. So this kind of stonewall symmetry generally reduces the advantage of the first move for white. So it's not feeling like an amazing opening for white. And there are some Fisher random positions where white gets a very nice position quickly. Or can, you know. But, I mean, white certainly gets a game with plenty of time to do things and try and get the advantage, and maybe even play g4 at some point to imbalance the structure. Anytime you're looking at some move like g4, then suddenly who moved first is going to matter quite a bit still in the first 10-15 moves, because it'll be hard for black to play a symmetrical move like g5. Once we get, you know, more than 10-15 moves down the road, it's less and less likely that white's achieving something faster than black's ready to handle it. So we get pure symmetry from Levon for a long time. And there's that g4 move, trying to do something for white. Hello, Akshat. Welcome to the show. g4, so if pawn takes, there's a number of things white can do. Knight e4, and then bishop takes e4 looks pretty good, right? But you might even want to prioritize this move queen g4 first. Or maybe not. Maybe black takes and then does something with the knight. That bishop trade on e5 let us defend the bishop with tempo. This position still looks glorious for white. Bishop pair, better center, good square for the queen. Are there any Fisher random positions that give black an advantage? No. Fair question, but no, there's none. They just give white different sizes of advantage. So he invites g5 from Hans if white wants a bit of a space edge. G takes f5, bishop takes f5 doesn't seem amazing. It seems like, although white's got the better structure and more of a clamp, it seems like the bishop on c1 is so much worse than the bishop on f5 that we've really conceded black life for their pieces. Hey, Matzenheim. You think maybe my comment was confusing? Or maybe I got the time zones wrong. I've been doing that a lot this year, which is really disorienting to me. But I think right now is 11. Well, I think I started the show at 11 p.m. Pacific, which is what I've been doing since I got to Hawaii. But I started the tournaments at 8 p.m. Pacific, which is what I've been doing for a full year. By my count right now, it's 11:30 in California and 8:30 here in Hawaii. But I'm totally expecting to have got that wrong somehow. Okay, g5, I got that right at least. That Hans would grab the space. Taking on f5 just looked bad, so he grabs it. Knight to h5. So the symmetry's been broken. The knight threatens f4. Easy to defend, right? With the bishop on c1 or the pawn on e2. Also, if black played knight f4, it might lose a piece to knight takes e4. So this pawn is definitely not sensitive, which makes it a little odd to put the knight on the side of the board, right? It doesn't have any obvious prospect for coming back into the game from here. So maybe black's under a little pressure here. So that's going to dig the knight out through g7. It's the only real option. Nothing too dramatic happening, and then this is like the next big moment. Hans wants to play a4 and b4 and just have a big space advantage on both sides of the board.
Hey, David?
Yeah.
Are you planning to eat that other piece of spinach tomato, or can my mom have it?
Hi, Ninja Lion. So I guess like a big question is, does Hans want to first go B4 or A4, right? Which each allow different things from Levon. Levon immediately, stops the advance, and it doesn't feel like A4, A5 added so much for white. I don't know why it did that to us. But okay, it's a chance for anyone just joining us to see how they got here. I'm a little surprised the black queen went to G7. What? So essentially nothing's going to work. Yeah, I thought the knight would want to transfer through there, but I guess it's just going to sit on H5 for a while. Otherwise, the queens are almost trapped by those outposted knights on E4 and E5. Threatening, I don't know what. He acts like he was threatening knight C5. So does Hans want to play knight C5? Mess up the structure but get the bishop into the game? Maybe. Conceivably. Knight's on a mission to try and get traded on G3 and get a file. He gets the file he wants. I imagine black's going to immediately move the H-pawn. Yeah, before white can settle in and do anything on that file. Immediate H5, some trading of rooks. White takes the file. Okay. Oh, I think I may have heard of that, Dabo. Yeah, I think that rings a bell. I can't tell you the position, but I think I've seen it. It's to teach you how to use the opposition, right? I feel like the white and black kings are on the B file or something. Okay, so nominal advantage for Hans. He gets the H file, and black can't really contest it. None of the pieces can do so much. Queen H6 or Queen H7, yeah. Leaves the G pawn hanging, but even if the G3 pawn weren't hanging, what does Queen H7 or Queen H6 do? Kind of trades a queen. White would need Knight E5 as well to put more oomph on the G6 pawn to make some pressure. Yeah, he puts it in because it's very instructive. So yeah, G5, immediately removing the pawn from the square on which it could get attacked and pressured. Trade, trade. Whoa, okay. So Hans takes, and if black takes back, he's going to take on G5 with an extra pawn and a passed pawn. Opposite colored bishops, but some hope. So Levon plays something fancy. Pawn takes pawn. And if you recapture on F4, he takes on E4, and everything's fine for black. So Hans goes into desperado mode. And now Hans has an extra passed G pawn. Huh, that's really legit. White has some hopes here to just chug up the board with the G pawn. Defend the bishop so that there isn't G4, bishop takes G4. goes for opposite colored bishops. Counterplay. Backs up. A6 is coming too, right? Blockades both pawns, blockades both pawns. Cool. And they each get a queen. Nice. Well played by both of them. Yeah, I mean, it's not the most exciting game, but it seemed quite well played. Good game and good endgame defense by Levon there. Good work by Hans to even make the position interesting when it was so safe for black from the opening. All right, so here we got the bishops on b1 and g1. You could go either way with the king. You could go either way with the bishops. Any undefended pawns? No. Interesting. Okay, so Levon kicks it off with the more aggressive move d4. Less aggressive is c4. c4, c5. More likely to be symmetrical with sort of slower maneuvering. d4 more likely to be able to follow up with c4 or something like that. And he goes straight into a queen's gambit, yeah. Takes is slightly odd, but he's just happy to get that bishop tempo. And he's just planning to play e5, but he doesn't get it. Funny if e4, knight b5, I guess. Yeah. Looks like Levon's getting the upper hand out of the opening here. He's hesitating to play e4, but it's hard to stop, and there he gets it. So here, you see the difference between this and the previous opening, right? This one is fantastically pleasant for white. This position here, you know, mobile center, black's bishops are blocked in and lack scope. The knights are not even secure on the squares they've chosen because white could always play d5 or e5 at some point for a move if they wanted to. We're going to have to go backwards, sure, Dabo, and see how it got so bad. Redeemed in what sense, Sweet Bell Pepper? I have to say I wasn't feeling redeemed, but maybe you know something about my feelings that I don't. So, Dabo, you're thinking like here at some point, Hans should play the knight to f5? It didn't occur to me. I don't really see what the point would be. Or is it earlier? Maybe right here, huh? Right before h5. You're wondering if here hitting the slight weakness before white establishes e4. I think this is the one and only move where it was Oh, Sweet Bell Pepper. Jesse and I disagree all the time, and I don't feel like I need any, you know, any redeeming or anything like that. I'm just surprised again and again at his capacity to be wrong about things. And I mean by miles and miles. You know, all the things I say are, you know, reasonably plausible with like a chance of being wrong and a chance of being right, but the chance of being wrong is by some moderate percentage. Like I said, Hans has, what did I say, maybe like a 5 to 7% chance of being world champion at some point. I didn't say he would be, right? I just said it was possible, like 5 to 7% chance. And the real truth might be 3% or 9%, right? But it's not 0 or 100, right? Like, it's going to be something pretty close to what I said, right? Because I say something, sort of reasonably in the ballpark. I know that I don't know for sure, and just the fact that I give like a range of percentages, right? And then Jesse will come in and say something like 0% or 100% or something silly like that, and it's just, or I said Anand had a chance to be number 10 in the world in a year, and at the end of the year he was like 11th or 12th. So I was wrong, but I wasn't wrong by miles. Jesse laughed at me for picking Anand, and he picked someone like more laughable, right? Like I think he picked Nihal Sarin or somebody like that to be number 10 in the world, right? I mean, he had less than a 1% chance of being right, and I probably had about a 40% chance of being right on my pick. Hans's performance at the freestyle, yeah, I mean, it's freestyle and it's not really classical, so I don't think that Jesse will particularly think it's revealing of anything. I think Kosi and I mentioned on the podcast that Hans often wins Title Tuesday or competes at the top of Title Tuesday, right? That he can compete on almost footing with Magnus and Hikaru in that event, right? I mean, he doesn't win it as often as they do, but I mean, he's a contender in Title Tuesday, right? He's a contender. And Jesse didn't care, right? He said it was just some Blitz games. So I don't think he's going to care about these. Like, this Vegas thing is not going to change Jesse's thinking, I don't think. And if it would have, I mean, there were all kinds of other results of Hans prior to this one, right, that could have equally convinced Jesse if he was paying attention or convincible. I think Jesse will believe that Hans could be a top 10 player when Hans is number 10 or 11. And yeah. Until then, he's just going to scoff at anything like this. Yeah. All right. So, Dabo, now that we're playing knight f5, you're saying you thought this would be a decent position. Are you missing something here? Let's find out. So one thought is this bishop's hitting the knight. So it might, first of all, there could be some kind of tactic that I'm not even seeing yet, right? Like some fancy knight move, destabilizing things. But my first thought is if white plays e3, just defending this pawn, now your knight's kind of dangling here. What do you want? What do you want to do next? Thematic or hopeful or logical or optimistic would be this move c5. I don't really see it here. Maybe queen c7. Light Knight Blitz says we could also start with knight b3 instead of e3, right? That's another way to defend the pawn. I think c5, knight takes c5 is just a failure. So, you want to try this? We could try this. It's a little blunt, but I'm sorry it doesn't make sense, Late Night Blitz. I tried to explain it, but basically e3 is planning to play e4. The idea of e3 was the knight's dangling and it's going to just have to retreat at some point soon, and then we'll play e4. And meanwhile, we defend this pawn. But your knight b3 move is looking potentially better at the moment. Still, with either move, we have to deal with queen c7, right? Similar move. So you can start figuring out what we should do if we play knight b3, queen c7, and I'll try to figure out what we do after e3, queen c7. I'm going to do one more at some point, Darpy. No good move for white here, right? I don't see anything other than f4 and g3, neither of which is desirable. Why? Because we've got a dark squared bishop on the king side, right? And a light squared bishop on the queen side. So we'd rather have these pawns on light squares on this side of the board. Thanks, Darpy. They're not what I'm planning on doing right this moment. I'm working on a series of videos of my own best games. I started maybe doing some tall games, but I'm a little put off by the fact that I did a whole video and apparently, even though OBS was working at the beginning, at some point, like 15 minutes into a 30-minute video, it just froze the board. And so then the rest of the video, there's no moves or squares or highlights or anything shown on the board. And so I maybe have to redo the whole thing. That sort of stuff always really dispirits me. Sometimes cancels entire projects. Yeah, I'm not pumped about that, Dabo. I think the first thing I want to say about that is that your suggestion of knight f5 seems better than what was played in the game. It seems clearly better. The move in the game looks terrible. Also, we can say, like, his position looks bad, and that move also looks bad. And then this move, I mean, I guess he's trying to play bishop a7 and pressure d4, but why did he play h5? Why, right? Knight b3, white's just got full control. You know, we could discuss how to play this positionally for white, but I mean, everybody knows who won the opening at this point, right? Just completely sad for black. I don't know why the pawn wouldn't be better on h7 than on h5. Oof. Abysmal. Yeah, I think you're right about knight f5 being a much better chance. That said, Dabo, I wouldn't expect black to have a great position here. I would expect black to be worse. Like, I feel the opening's gone wrong even before this, right? And your knight f5 move looks way more of a two-way street. A lot harder for white to play. So I'm not trying to take anything away from that find. I really think it totally changes the game. Dramatic, a critical mistake, it seems. But I mean, already here, I would guess the position's terrible for black, wouldn't you? I mean, d4, queen here, white could just play e4 already here if they really wanted to, right? What's good for black? I guess they're going to try and attack this pawn, right? Like what could have happened in the game. Just here, rook d8, knight d2, and then something here, huh? But, I mean, this knight has to move to do anything, right? Knight here, that looks terrible. I guess it's c5, some pawn sack. Pawn takes, knight still has to go somewhere terrible. 98 crushing white. Who let the dogs out? I mean, those dogs are in the backyard, right? They're not bothering white. They're in black's own backyard. You would play for knight f8 and then maybe e5. Okay, so if I like played quick e4 for Levon, I think castling is reasonable, so I'm going to do that for you. And then knight f8. Okay, that means the rook has to move. And now we're going to go knight f8. White's going to castle. Looks like white's got e5 super covered, so I don't yet see how you're going to do it. It's a laudable intention to play e5 for black, but I don't see it. I mean, the fact that black has to play moves like knight f8 or whatever to untangle, white's actually ending up ahead in development, plus with the center, and every piece is better placed. I don't truly see a shred of hope for black in this position myself. Yeah, just terribly grim already. So, and that's even with white having to play a4 to stop knight b5. You're saying why not e5 in that position I just had? Give up the pawno. Right here. Just give up the pawno. So let's say white takes. I imagine you take back. I don't know. Yeah. Then white puts the knight on this big old central weak spot. By the way, this pawn is so weak and isolated that there could be other options other than taking it, right? Like white could prepare things with bishop g3, bishop a2, and just play positionally. It would be an amazing advantage for white already, but I don't see why I shouldn't just take it and dream of trading here and then playing bishop a2. That'll be even better. So I noticed you've got the theme of knight to b5 here maybe, but I didn't think it was bad for white. I thought knight e4 would be a blunder. So the only tactical move that I was really looking at was knight b5, which I think is sort of sound more or less, but I don't think it... Actually, never mind. I've refuted it. I was going to say, like, I don't think it helps black, but I don't think it sinks black further. All it does is give up the bishop pair, and then once I thought about the bishop pair, I realized actually knight b5 does make things a little bit worse for black, because right here, after rook d2, white can emphasize the missing bishop, right? Go after this. Force knight e6, I think. Then lodge the bishop here. These things defend each other. The pair of bishops is a monster. This thing heads back. And, you know, bishop a2 or something. Black's under a lot of pressure on this side of the board from the bishop pair. Plus, white's up a pawn still. And yeah, it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse. So I don't know if you had something else in mind for black here after the pawn sack, but first look is pretty bad. Normal game, just down a pawn, huh? Yeah. I am still in Hawaii, bell pepper. Another 2.5 weeks here before I head back to California. It is. It is. I'm very lucky. I've always had things very good. At least now you're not cramped, you know. I think practically speaking, Dabo, that's another good instinct from you, honestly. You probably save a lot of games by making that kind of choice. And just playing a game where all your pieces can move. Even if you're down a pawn, you only need one mistake from the opponent and then you can really pounce because your pieces are capable of pouncing by playing that way. So, but yeah, I mean, I think this looks really, really bad for Hans. Already from here. Maybe here he should try harder to play e5? Maybe even queen d7. Just blunt on the d file. Maybe that would achieve e5. Yeah. That might be slightly better, but honestly, even just taking on c4, slightly risky. And then it's just getting worse every move. Such an easy position for white at this point. Goes for e5. All right, why does black do something so dramatic as to get into all this? Let's have a quick look. Why they can't do something normal. So trading the f pawn seems to weaken the whole king side. So naturally, I mean, the most natural move would be knight c4. Second most natural would be knight to f5. Yeah, looks playable as well. Whatever Levon did with e5, I didn't quite see it coming, and even now I don't see why it's so good. I don't see anything convincing for white against either knight c4 or knight f5. little too much in my eyes. Knight f5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Attacking d4 for sure. Knight c5, trying to block it off. That combination doesn't quite work. I guess white's a bit better here. Let's try with knight c5 again. All right. Take care, Dabo. Yeah. Always good to be asleep before 3 a.m., but we're also always happy to have you. So knight here. Here I looked at knight c5. I thought black trades twice and then takes this pawn. So here I rejected it. Yeah, till next time. Yeah, I don't see anything to justify it even now. Just asking myself to look at it for an extra move. Trading on f6 doesn't seem to help. ef6, ef6 for black, and the king side's still well covered. Maybe something like here, with the idea that if black takes, we don't take with this piece at all, we take here. Idea b3, idea knight e5, knight e5 is a good position for white. That one's very, very clear because the pawn leaves f6, and then black's dark squares are all very weak. Positions just completely glorious for white. So let's say e5, knight c4, knight bc5. Idea is really to push b3. Yeah, I guess white's still better. I don't see anything super clear. I have a feeling it might be my evaluations failing, not my calculation and awareness. So he tries this fancy thing. Puts the knight on an amazing square and then supports it with the pawn. Seems pretty crushing. Nothing to do about it, really. Woo, sweet move to simplify. Oh! Getting behind that pawn. Okay. Clean up the e-pawn. Idea knight c4 stops that. Some details, some kicks, some threats. Yeah. Pretty crushing. Few little messy moves there, but overall for their level seems like a somewhat easy game for Levon in that second game there. here. Let's switch that board to this board. And it's ruined again. Okay. Maybe working. I feel like it's going to freeze the board again in a moment. Okay, let's try a little warm up. Play a bot. It's weird. Put it on Blindfold. You just click on the pieces you want, then you go to Blindfold. Save. Let's play. Wait a minute. I can still see the pieces. Let's refresh it. I can still see the pieces. I don't know what's going on with this stupid Velociraptor, but looks like we can't turn off the pieces. That's really annoying. Pawn takes pawn, knight d4, queen e4, e3, check, queen e7. Not so easy, Mr. Bambizi. could trade and push d5, knight d4, then give check and castle. They can take on c2. Yeah, I don't trust that. Bishop e5, f6, take a whole bunch. That's insane. Okay, I can take back my piece if I want. Start with rook e1 maybe here. Hey Louvre. How are you doing? King goes somewhere hopeless. Hopeless, we are hopeless. If I go knight c7, rook c8, I can do stuff, but it feels like bishop c7, queen moves d6 is almost more clear. It's weird because the bishop seems good where it is. You wouldn't think you need to move the bishop. Oh well. Just want to get it over with. I wanted to practice blindfold and then this thing won't turn off the board. Revealing the point of queen e8. It was to move the knight off f6. Is knight d6 even better than bishop d6? Normally I wouldn't find that move. Well, yeah. Now how do I get out of here? Maybe if I get past these silly dinosaur ones. What's the difference? Okay, we'll try Manuel. Now at least the board's hidden. Alright, so here's some proper blindfold chess. E4, C5, f3, d6. Najdorf from Manuel. I play bishop e3, e5, knight b3. I guess there's no way for anyone else to follow, so I should try and do this relatively quickly. f3, h5. Okay. Bishop e6 without bishop e7. h5. So let's just play knight d5 immediately. Knight bd7. I don't know where any of the pieces are myself, Francois. I guess I want to play c4 and protect my pawn center. Now bishop e7 comes. He's got a knight on f6 still. I just put my bishop on the best angle. We'll see. I put it on blindfold mode, so I guess it's normal. Wow, and he sacks the pawn right away. Weird. Immediate pawn sack. Weird. Very aggressive. Castle. Castle. Oh shoot, they can just play queen b6. Ay, 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 ay. Uh-oh. I blundered that move. Rook e8. Did I play queen d2 at some point? No. So the queen's still on d1. That's there. That's there. Rook on e8, knight on g4, knight on e5. Bishop on e7. Brings the knight back. Okay. Knight e4. What? What's going on? Why can't I play bishop takes e4? Oh, did I drop my bishop back to e2? To defend the knight with my queen? Oops. Uh-oh. Then in that case, my bishop's on e2 now. I guess I'll take this pawn. Knight c3. Definitely scary. I might play queen d3, but there's a knight on e5, right? G6. This is just too nerve-wracking. Wait a minute. Is the knight hanging on c3? Hey, Skivix. It's not the normal thing. But if I've got this position right, I should just take on c3. Alright, hopefully not hanging my queen or something. Now he takes on h5. King h1. Bishop f8. I won't let that bishop come to g7. Knight f5. What? My position's amazing now. h4. Alright. Now it's like a crushing position, and I know where everything is at the moment. Is rook ae1 a mistake? Sometimes I bring my last piece in when I should just be attacking. Like maybe I should just go queen f3 to g4. But the knight on e5 is covering f3 and g4, so I should not. I mean, not every single person in the world, Skibix, but most. But it's probably attainable for a lot of people. All right, I'm just going to plunk out one of my boring blitz moves. Knight g6, retreating. Interesting. So now, if I played like bishop takes d6, isn't that like a simple winning combination? What is Manuel up to? I suppose Manuel is planning to sacrifice the queen or something? That doesn't really make much sense. But all right, let's not think too long. Let's just plunge forward and find myself having made a mistake at some point, right? It's part of the fun of all this. Queen d8. Okay, so the plan is that after I trade on f8, the queen will defend the mates. Fine. It's fine by me. It's simpler to trade. I'm less likely to forget where the pieces are. And I'm going to bring in my queen to f6, which is kind of pointless. It's just me kind of getting in my opponent's face. b5. All right, so the remaining defender, there's this knight on g6. I think it's fine to just advance this past pawn, the d pawn here. My opponent's not really doing much. I could calculate knight e7 check, but I'll just recapture. When you're winning by this much and you're blindfolded and they can't do anything, why let them do anything? So knight e7 check still looks like easily winning on the previous moves, but I thought maybe I'll just walk the c pawn down. Now rook a6 stops c6, but shouldn't it lose to rook e8, a simple tactic. There's no back rank mates. That forces mate, more or less, against the opponent. I take the queen. Knight f8. And checkmate. All right. Now, I'll show you all the game, I guess. It's not giving me a move list, but there we go. I can show it now. Yeah, I know you've been working on it, Skibix. Have you ever made any efforts at blindfold play? I know you've been working on extending your visualization or clearing it up, right? You're normally looking at like 3 move variations, but they feel super foggy for you. So this was the game. Mainline Knightorf, h5 to stop the whole English attack part. I tried the immediate knight d5, I don't know why, just randomly picked something. c4 to protect my d-pawn. And yeah, here I don't know if I should go to d3 or e2. But he immediately played this interesting pawn sack, which puts pressure on me. I expected black to basically, you know, castle, play g6, you know, move the knight, play f5. But he just gives a pawn right away to activate the pieces like this. And it's uncomfortable when playing blindfolded, but I thought for a moment, oh, maybe this knight could get into the light squares. Because that's the one thing that the e5 pawn did before getting sacked, is it kept the knight on b3 on a bad square, right? So I at least immediately recognized, okay, I could try and do something with my knight. Trying to save my bishop with bishop c2 or bishop e2 just leaves a pawn hanging. But leaving the bishop on d3 leaves me with a bad tactical element, right, that my queen's committed. So I was a bit uncomfortable here. I castled. My opponent castled. And now I played probably a small mistake because of being blindfolded. Hi, Krishna. Hi, Cats. Play chess very well. Played knight d4, not taking knight g4 properly into account. And then, of course, there's the follow-up queen b6. So I was lucky that I didn't completely lose the game with this move here. What should I have done in this position? My first guess would be h3, stopping knight g4. Second guess would be king h1, so that whenever knight g4 comes, I have the option of bishop to g1 as well. But knight d4 was definitely a move too soon. Krishna, you're asking what should black have thought about before going for this pawn sack? Basically, to sack this pawn, I would say black should have a pretty concrete follow-up. They should have something specific in mind with knight e5 and knight g4 or something. If they just castle like the computer did here, there should be many ways for white to be better. You know, h3 and king h1, like I just said. I mean, for all I know, white could even play rook c1 and just push c5. Right? So this position should not be okay for black just on general principles. Okay? So to make e4 work, you have to have a very specific idea in mind. You know, it has to be, you know, and then we come here, you know, and then the bishop, and then the queen. Like, there has to be something specific. But when black just castles, it means it didn't work. Yeah, I've heard of that method before, Skibix, but I haven't heard of a name for it. We have friends traveling to meet us today, so I do have to keep my phone on and just check how they're doing on their travel if they need any help from me. So the method Skibix is talking about, like, they give you a position and then they give you a variation. The variation itself is not a tactic. It's just a series of moves that you're supposed to follow. And then at the end of that series of moves, they ask you to then find a tactic, but not like a complicated tactic, just like it's the same. It's like asking what piece is hanging or what doubled attack is available, you know, or something like that. It should be really simple, but it's just to see, do you really see the position at the end of the previous line in your head? I've heard of that method before. I think it's a pretty cool method. I've heard of it working for other people, and I've heard good things about some people who've used that. But I don't know of a name for it. So I play my bad move, but this computer program, you know, it's not super high rated, so it doesn't immediately destroy me for it. Maybe it can't. I mean, queen b2, rook b1, queen a2, rook b7 is complex. Doesn't necessarily work out great for black. Maybe they don't have anything super obvious. Bishop f6 would be scarier, putting pressure on that knight, right? But again, the computer wastes one tempo, so I'm able to kick this piece back, and now I'm comfortable, right? I can play bishop e3, I can play king h1, I can do whatever. I played b3. That defends the b2 pawn and the c4 pawn, which frees this bishop to get used, right? My opponent takes this pawn, which I hadn't even realized. For a moment, I thought my bishop was on d3. Then I realized, oh, it can't be on d3 because then the knight would be hanging on d4. Luckily, you know, b3 has also freed the bishop for this, and now I'm threatening perhaps bishop e5, f e5, bishop f7 check, followed by taking the rook. If the king comes to the h file, there's also queen h5, maybe even if the king goes to the f file. So it's a pretty scary threat. So the computer played knight c3. I think g6 would be correct. That's what I expected. And yeah, like maybe a simpler move here would be bishop f3, which I considered for a bit. And if the computer had played g6 before knight c3, it might have gone g6, bishop f3, knight c3, and gotten in this position. But then I realized I could take here, make black turn this g pawn into an h pawn. That's terrible for their king side. And now my knight has this square. And once it's there, you know, I think I could win this position against anybody, blindfolded or not. This was pretty simple position. The pawn's hanging. I knew it was hanging. There's nothing defending it. I just didn't want to give him even one move to bring the bishop to g7. Even if I could take bishop g7, come back to f5, probably still be in charge. So I played rook e1. The idea of this move is to take a bunch of times on e5, just win a pawn here, and slowly break my queen through to the king. Also, I'm slightly happy to trade the bishop for this knight because I want to lift one of my rooks to the 4th rank, and the bishop on f4 is kind of in the way of being able to give those kind of checkmates. I thought the computer might even play f6 here. f6 is a real groan of a move because then this bishop is really trapped and I can just ignore it and definitely go take this pawn at that point. Or maybe knight d4 into e6. But the computer just gave a pawn anyway with this move, keeping the knight on the board to defend the king. But I have an easy tactic, bishop d6, because the bishop has to stop checkmate. There's a trade. I thought maybe the computer was going to play queen takes d6, but it hung on a little bit like this. This was my, you know, I don't know, safety first creeping move. Computer played here. I thought about c5 and d6. I also thought about rook e7, knight e7, rook e4. But finally, I thought if I've got two extra connected passed pawns, I mean, and the computer basically can't move, there's nothing simpler than putting both pawns on the 7th rank. Nothing could get wrong. Computer stops c6, so I played rook here. And then there's checkmate on g7. So that was the blindfold game. Went fine. Went fine. Says one mistake. I felt like there were 2 mistakes there. All right. So, let's just try and play a Blitz game, see how bad we go. I've got a real problem with just lag on my computer here, so we'll see what happens to me with that. How are you doing, Steve Nash? Ooh, that's nice. How about music? What have you been doing? What have you been doing with your guitar lately? Three chess clubs a week? That's beautiful. That's cool, Skibix. You know how to train your own chess engine? Very cool. Nice, nice. All right, we got a game here. Good luck to S. Vilson. And to me, if it takes 5 seconds for the computer to show my position. Oh no, this is going to be impossible to play. I have to like guess the move that my opponent's played. So he was worried about bishop b4 check. So let's just go for it, shall we? I mean, I'm going to lose on time otherwise if the game goes long with the lag. that I've got. I think I gotta go here immediately. Then give the Chekaruski. Then bring out a Rookaruski. Just need to win one more of these pawns. Get my rooks near the king. What have they come up with? Queen. That's a pretty good looking move. I'm going to need a good move to match it, right? I guess we're getting an endgame after all. Doesn't feel like it's going great for me, this endgame, huh? I guess I could try to bail out with a draw. Oh no, I missed that knight coming there even. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, that's more like losing now, suddenly. Uh-oh. 30 seconds. There's not really anything to do about that. That's a heavy blow. Terrible. I had to just guess what the opponent was doing. Ugh. The lag is just too much. Like, I can't even see the position in 2 seconds, much less make a move. Ay, ay, ay. Alright, so I can't play on this computer. That's unfortunate. High effort guitars and low effort vocals. Nice. Ay, ay, ay. Alright, I'm going to play over the game since I have nothing else I can do. Hey, Decan. Depends what you mean by or how you imagine learning chess games by heart. Learning chess games by heart and learning chess kind of can go hand in hand. Like, as you learn chess, you're maybe able to remember the games. If you try to remember a game by learning the chess behind it, you might be able to get better at chess and remember the game better. But if you tried to turn chess games into like the first 100 digits of pi and just rote memorize series of moves, that's not going to teach you any kind of knowledge, right? If you just know the order of the moves as pure things, like you read them off a page without even seeing the board, maybe, right? Just d4, d5, c4, c6, etc. That's not going to do anything for your gain. In general, chess can be learned in many different ways, right? So learning a bunch of classical games that are really instructive and understanding them and memorizing them would be one approach to learning chess. Another is just to play games. There's all kinds of different ways you can get better. They all have their own limitations. Like, no one method is going to take you all the way to 2800, nor is any method going to be completely useless. And sorry, Krishna, I don't know the names of the openings well enough to know what you're talking about with Blackburn Schilling and Blackburn Kostic. I just don't know those names. Okay. So I'm going to turn on this chess.com computer engine if I can reclaim my mouse, which is wandering in a different direction than where I'm moving it. H5. For a moment, it seemed to be the top computer move here. H4. Bishop G4, top computer move. Wow. Top computer move. Now the computer wants me to play knight B6. C4. Sorry, knight B6 to stop C4. Man, knight B6, B3, knight C8, C4, knight E7. Holding the square on D5 with that knight. That's a crazy maneuver. Did not consider it. I expected C4 here. They didn't play it. I've got a lot of freedom now for black. I didn't play F5, which I really wanted to play because of F3, but I just didn't look hard enough. I'm not even looking at a computer line, but I can tell now that F5, F3, Queen E3, FG4, Bishop G3 is mate. So I just didn't look at F5, which is what I really wanted to play. I didn't look at it long enough. Okay, I really believed in the move I played, but the computer did not list it as one of the top moves. Said C4 is decent for white. I trade. It trades. Oh, and now suddenly the computer sees bishop takes G3 winning. But it didn't see it 3 moves ago. Oh my gosh. So I win against the computer here. Now here I had a feeling I should go queen a3. Ugh, I should have. So this is where I blew it. The sacrifice was good. I had queen a3 in my mind, and then I thought maybe queen here is just as good. But the big difference is it's not because of knight h2, which is the only good move for white. So props to Svilson for finding knight f1 h2. I mean, I predicted the moves during the game. But I guess with queen a3, the difference between that and queen e7, they both have access to, you know, this checking diagonal and picking up the c pawn. But the queen on a3 means that on knight h2, bishop e2, they can't take with their queen because they would lose it to rook e8. And the queen can also get to g3 after king takes. You can go queen g3, cutting the king off. So I was right, and then I did this, and there's one defense. And this position's apparently not good for me now. So I've already blown it. I still felt like I had fair chances here. Oh, interesting move. Here, knight d3 check. King f3, queen b2 is slightly better than what I did. Just slightly. It's so weird. It's such a slight finesse. So, knight check here, here. Right, so they still can't allow rook takes d4. It's just too powerful, so they have to go to this endgame. In the game, I played the same position, but with the knight already on c4. The difference here is the king is in the way of these pieces improving themselves, most notably knight f3. So the threats to win this pawn, right, if white attacks the knight, it'll then go to c4, and the rook b1 tempo is useless for white, and then we're attacking this. But otherwise, the knight's stopping rook to d1. And the computer thinks white is still slightly better with a line that does not look at all convincing to me. Knight takes here. Only move king f2. Knight e3. Only move bishop f3. And then you take this, and the computer still thinks white's slightly better here? This looks fairly safe for black after collecting both center pawns. It is very, very fancy. Hey, Richard, how are you? Okay, but I played queen c4, and I definitely felt a bit worse here. But this is also where I started to just not be able to come up with things fast enough. So I just wanted the knight, which only hurts me. I should just trade the bishop on g2 at this point, right? The knight's going to have a hell of a time winning an endgame like this. I should just take it off the board. What was I even considering? I'm just wandering around in circles. I'm not even trying to necessarily mobilize the pawns, Richard. It's just if I trade my knight for the bishop, then I've got 3 pawns against a knight, and a knight's not really better than 3 pawns in the endgame. A knight is often better than 3 pawns in the middle game, but once you reach the endgame, it's really just that white would have a hard time organizing their pieces to do much. Whether we keep rooks on the board or trade rooks, I mean, the knight's just not, I just don't think it's going to beat 3 pawns. Be very, very rare. At some point here, yeah, I should have played just, you know, b5, king b6 and stuff. I just moved back and forth confused. Here I should just come back to g4 again. Should still be playing b5 here. Finally I do. Get chased back. This dumb looking move. I kick it here. And now I went to the E file, just terrible blunder, and they can just come back to the E file themselves, right? But this pawn is basically hanging. I should just make a knight move, right? Knight f6, draw. Yeah, computer agrees. Knight f6 draw, knight e7 draw, knight b6 draw, king b6 draw. Just waiting to move the knight, a move. And I go to the e file like a dummy. Takes, takes. And it's still drawn. 3 pawns against a piece in the endgame, and the simplest is f4, trading another pawn. From the opponent, I wander around like a dummy. Should have played knight b1 immediately. And then I flagged while trying to play either a4 or knight b1. But either way, it's still a draw. Yeah. You're saying here when I got checked, why didn't I try and play rook e8 and trade rooks? Honestly, this pawn on d4 is very, very weak. So that's part of why king d6 was such a dumb move. And now I take it back. And there's hanging d4, hanging d3. It's not easy for white to defend that pawn. So I don't think it would necessarily be terrible to try and go king d7, rook e8. But trading rooks isn't a major advantage for me. I'm not afraid of trading rooks, but I'm not especially trying to. And at the moment, my rook has some good targets. So hence king c7. Okay. Interesting game. Which would have been nice if I didn't lose 3 minutes to lag. Would have been able to play the endgame quite a bit better. Now, how would this have worked if I hadn't taken on c4 first? fg3. Queen e3 is the only move. Knight f1. Gotta save the queen. Yeah, it's not as clear because we don't have a good square. dc4, correct. And now the computer knows, it's learned from what I showed it before, that it shouldn't take with the pawn.
Picking up them?
What's that?
Texted you. Are you picking up St. John?
Why?
Because my mom's about to leave and she left the car and you put all her stuff. I apologize. I figured you would have told me.
So now basically I can always play g5. So the white king is just weird. Yeah. Which means everything about how I played this opening seems really correct for black. All right, I'm going to save this position because it's cool. My game history. All right, I've saved the position. Yeah, all the tournaments were both canceled today. Didn't have participants in them. So I'm just hanging out. My computer's completely dying, so I can't even play a couple games myself like I was trying to do for fun. I have a lag of more than 2 seconds per move. So I flagged even with a 2-second increment and just a few moves, playing some simple moves. Yeah. Totally, Richard. This is very, very, very classic of what black's trying to do in this opening. What I did here. You have to be prepared for white to play c4 the whole time. And white's pawn structure looks impeccable, right? All the pawns on dark squares, bishop on light squares, everything was well defended. But you can always try and set up some breakthroughs. A sack here, a sack here, you know, a g5 or an f4 lever or something. So you always can get something interesting going. Can you strengthen the sacrifice with rook e8? Well, the sacrifice is already more or less winning for black here. But rook e8, you say. Let's imagine that white plays maybe knight e4. We can drop back. It's not too bad. We can play f5, f4 at some point. What's a desirable move for white? Like, white could try queen b3. White could try castles. No move is totally simple. maybe this move is relatively desirable. Let's try this for a moment. Yeah. If white had castled kingside really early, Steve Nash, I would have played g5. So I don't know how early we want to talk about, but like here, for example, right after I've castled queenside, this would be a first example. If white castles here, then I have a pawn breakthrough that's just as effective as any piece sack. So I might as well use a pawn instead of a piece, right? If I wanted to break through the piece sack, I might need to maneuver the knight to f5 somehow here, which is a little hard to do at the moment. So much better just g5, and gh is devastating. Now gh does almost nothing with white's rook on h1, which is why I didn't hurry to spend a tempo on g5. Right? Because if I play g5 and white plays c4 and gets their queenside attack going, the g5 tempo will not be my most efficient tempo, right? So I played queen e7. That lets me put the rook on d8 quickly. Now, if white's not careful, there will be positions where I can even play c5 and just blow up the center if their king is here, right? But if they castle, the moment they do, I'm going to play g5. So I have to find, I have to prepare and threaten this kind of bishop takes g3 idea or a c5 breakthrough, as long as they haven't castled. I have to prepare those kind of actions. Also, I'm considering always this idea of f5 to play an f4 pawn break as a pawn sack. And when I play f5, what I always have to calculate is f3 from white trapping the bishop, which is basically, it's another piece sack. It's like I'm trying to sack a pawn, but I have to be ready to sack a piece. And, an example of that and how it could already work is like here, if I wanted to, I could play f5 already. And against f3, play queen takes e3. And against pawn takes bishop, there's this little mating combination. Hey, Scotty, how are you? So, yeah, when white plays b3, they're trying to play c4. I think what white didn't want, and they may have been overly afraid of this, is they didn't want c4, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop check, which forces either knight d2 or king f1. But those moves aren't so terrible for white. They're not necessarily reasons not to have played c4 in that position. Compared to b3, a tempo-losing move that weakens the dark squares more, they would have probably been better off just c4, I think. But, an interesting thing is I think the computer already says that black's better. So that tells you something about a position like this, right? Because it looks like white's done everything right. They haven't wasted a single tempo yet. But black's moves have slightly out-prepared white's moves. You know what I mean? Like this inclusion of h5, threatening an early h4 and maybe even h3. White deals with it with h4, but then g3 is sensitive, and there is the g5 break to worry about, right? And then the tempo on bishop g4 at a moment where, bishop f3, pawn f3, knight e2, knight f3, every move had its disadvantage. Let me show you that moment where I play bishop g4, which this fairly weak computer immediately recognizes the best move for black here. Part of the point of this move order is that if white goes knight f3, I can quickly jam f5. They can't threaten f3 fast enough to exploit this move, and I'm going to jam the pawn all the way to f4 very quickly and break the dark squares a bit. So that's like an example of like a downside here, right? Another downside for white is bishop f3. I'll be able to just hold the tension as well with f5. And if they ever take, then they have the problem that my rook is having this influence here, and g5 is a major pressure point. So here, as white, I would already be thinking of playing moves like queen e2, knight d2, castles queenside. Just because I'm so cramped on this other side of the board. Or maybe queen d2, knight c3, which slightly sucks, obviously, against black's c6, d5 pawns. But it leaves a square for the knight on g1 to get out. And the queen on d2 helps stop the f4 break. But But basically, black has control over this g5 move, and white's structure is still brittle to sacks here or a pawn push to f4. And there's nothing good about white's position, right? I mean, we're 9 moves in. Black's got rook and bishop developed. White's got nothing developed. It's their move, so they're only down 1.5 tempi, but that's pretty bad for white in 9 moves. To have not won a pawn or taken over the center or anything and be down 1.5 tempi. So this bishop g4, it's an uncomfortable moment for white. And then once they commit to this, just takes away some of the options for that knight and for the queen. And let me elaborate slightly on the c5 move, Steve Nash. In this position here, I want to be castled first to connect my rooks to be able to put a rook on e8. And I maybe, I may or may not play c5 right here, but I do have like a general theme, right? So I don't know if I'm threatening c5, but I've got a general theme that there are positions where they could play c4, and obviously I had something even better here with bishop takes g3, so I went for it. But there could be positions where you basically go c5 in response, just giving up the light square. Here's what I thought I didn't like. Takes. It'd be very thematic to trade the hanging pawn on d5, right? Then play c5, trying to crack the dark squares. But white can play d5, and that's a pretty good pawn. The knight wants to come to e4. This is not so easy to evaluate or to assess. I mean, obviously black has weakened white's dark squares a little bit. There's some play for the black pieces. Maybe knight e5, looking at d3 and f3. But it's not super clear, but there's another theme, and this is the thing about chess positions. Like, there are certain moves which are plausible or likely to be good in a position, but you have to then, based on that, then you have to go case by case, right? Like, you know what some of those moves are. And then you get to this position, you ask yourself, should I go for dc4, c5? Or should I go for c5? Or should I go for dc4, bishop b4? Or should I go for bishop takes g3? Or should I go for dc4 first and then bishop takes g3, right? There's like 5 or 6 options here. But anyway, the idea of c5, right, is basically you give this pawn. They could take it with pawn or bishop. Different choices, right? But whichever one they do, the point is that you can then take on d4 with, serious counterplay on the e-file. Right? If white plays e4 trying to keep things locked and say your structure is bad, then this move gives black quite a bit of juice. And if white takes this way, the extra pawn's not that amazing at the moment. We pretty much go rook e8, forcing the weakening move f3. Otherwise, they lose the knight, right? And then we win this back. Yeah, it's a slaughter. Slaughter, probably. So, I mean, I don't know how great exactly it was in this case, because I spent more of my time thinking about bishop takes g3 once I assessed that as being the most plausible, or likely to be the best. But c5 looks possible. Yeah. All right, so Richard, knight takes c4 was better than b takes c4, to answer your question. Because b takes c4 basically lost to this sacrifice I did. This position's borderline lost for white. So that means that the absolute priority for white was to take with the knight to avoid black's breakthrough. But black still just has a great position after dropping back here. Yeah, black's ahead in development, rook's connected. It's logical to try and crank something open, right? Also, white's a little bit sensitive already on these spots here. I mean, they're the main spots they're trying to defend, but They're a little bit sensitive anyway. Yeah. And like in this position here, if white castles kingside, g5 will immediately be good for black. Right? So this is part of the problem white's facing, is that if they castle, the main problem is king safety for white here, right? If they castle g5, and that's immediately kind of a raging attack. But if you're not going to castle kingside, castling queenside doesn't look great either. So then you just have to hunker down here. And then if you're going to just leave your king on e1 all game, then the rook on h1 is not participating. You have to somehow, generate a vicious attack against black's king without the rook on h1 pretty much, right? That's almost like you're partly like committed to that as your main strategy. And then if you get chances to trade off some pieces and try and make the game simpler, you can take those chances, but you can't just go out and force piece trades, right? So, you know, you do something like this, black does something like rook e8, and personally, I think with the black pieces more coordinated, it's very unlikely that white's going to play b4, b5 faster than black's going to find a breakthrough, even though white's stuff looks a little more tightly defended. Was h4 a mistake? I mean, h4 was the obvious move to me during the game, but I can go back and see if the computer suggests something else as having been better way back then. That's here, right? I mean, I expected white to play h4, right? Yeah, standard knee-jerk reaction, because if black plays h4, that's a lot of pressure here, plus the idea of h3 messing with your kingside pieces. But let's see if this was a mistake for white. What does the computer suggest? So this computer's not super strong, but it's evaluating knight f3, knight d2, and h4 as being pretty similar. By the way, I would guess that white's mistake was g3. I know that's going like way back, right? We're now down to like analyzing move 4 or something of a game, but basically, I think that it's very important for white to play c4 in this structure. Therefore, might as well just get it done immediately while the bishop's here, instead of send the bishop over to g2, then work to play c4. Let's see if the computer agrees with me. The computer says c4 is equal here. And after g3, it immediately says black is slightly better. And it likes bishop d6, knight d7, and even h5 already. But bishop d6 it likes best. And then after bishop g2, it liked h5 best as well. Now it's saying king f8 and h5 are equally good. I'm not going to pretend I understand why king f8 would be as good. Computer wants to play king f8, g6, king g7, and then push the h-pawn in the middle game. So tuck the king away on the king side, but leave the rook on h8. That's wild. I mean, it gives it minus 0.38, and it gives h5 minus 0.37 now. It's not good enough that you can trust it to that degree, but I think we can trust that black's already better. Yeah. So that means I was right about this. G3 is a mistake, and then black's better. And C4 would be still equal. I mean, it didn't just give black's bishop targets. It would be even worse if white left the dark squares open after giving up the dark squared bishop. But this G3 move actually specifically, it's a lost tempo. You can also think of it this way, Steve. You can think of it just in terms of like development tempo, right? It's a pure lost tempo, plus it makes it harder to play your main plan of c4. Plus it gives black a hook on the king side, which is where black often looks for play in this structure. Because normally after c4, white has more influence on the queen side with a semi-open c-file and the power of the d4 pawn. Black can't hold d5 because an isolated pawn on d5 is pretty bad in this structure, so they'll almost always just take on c4 and hope their pieces are free enough, but they accept that their center is less good, right? So this is white's main plan. g3 makes white's main plan harder, plus wastes a full tempo of development, plus makes black's main plan better. So there's 3 clear minuses on this g3 move. The only plus would be sort of securing the dark squares even better. But that's too nebulous a goal to play a non-developing, non-plan furthering move on move 5 in a chess game. Right? I mean, by comparison, let me give you an example of like what it could be like. Let's say black played this position here. And then they just said, well, you know, it's time to defend some dark squares. And just put a pawn on h6. It's just not enough for a move to do this early in a game. You see what I mean? It's not an abysmal move. The pawn is mildly helpful at compensating for the bishop that we just traded off. You know, it's not positionally wrong the way g6 would be horrendous, right? It's positionally correct, but it's just on move 5 in a game, it's too slow and too nebulous. And positional goals like that, they're too much in flux, you know? Like, you can't count on this move this early proving to be a useful tempo when white can already take it into account, and maybe they go for a plan like, you know, rook g1, g4, g5 or something, you know? Like, they can play in a way where that pawn, like everything, no matter how correct it is, usually has some minuses as well as pluses, right? So the positional advantages you get out of little pawn placements around move 5 or 6, etc., right? They're just not quite cutting it. Gukesh has done early h6 even in this Nimzo here, right? So in a position, what position was it? I mean, I feel like it almost might have been like queen c2. Like white played some normal move, queen c2 or something, and he played h6 on move 4. And afterwards he said, you know, it's not so bad. But it was obvious. It's like obviously subpar to get white out of theory. You know, he did it only, you know, he did it against the worst player in the candidates tournament, Abasov, trying really hard to collect a big win with black. That's what got him to the world championship, you could almost say. Was managing to take just enough risks and create just enough complication and weirdness to beat the weaker player with black. Because Gukesh didn't beat Naka or Fabi or Nepo, right? So I would think of the weakness of this g3 move as not being that you shouldn't block the dark squares, but just that you don't have the time to do this at this point, right? You have to be playing c4, knight c3, you know, the moves that really further your game. And yeah, always dangerous to waste time in the opening. And you know, little mistakes like that, they cost you like 2/10 of a pawn maybe. You know, 1 to 2/10 of a pawn. So at most levels, you know, it's not going to be felt so severely. But this game was like a blitz game, so my opponent played a few of them in a row, and soon enough, he was really bad. White in the Nimzo. Sure, Richie. Sure. Show us a related idea. Happy to see it. Here's my Nimzo position. All right, so it's going to be Queen C2. Knight F3, so kind of a combo of Knight F3 and Queen C2. Interesting. The super theoretical lines here, played by a lot of GMs, E4. So you go Knight F3. Now I imagine main lines for black here are probably D5 and C5. So you're playing C5 in this line. And then you're trying D5 for white, avoiding these kind of CD4, Knight D4 positions that often happen in Knight F3 Nimzos. I would guess A3 would also be a move for white here. That looks like typical. You can also sometimes just take on C5, right? That's how there are mainline Queen C2, C5 Nimzos without black having castled. That would go something like here. And then if here, you can do anything. I mean, they play sometimes Bishop F4. Here I can imagine G4. Although Knight G4, Rook G1, Bishop F2 doesn't look fully sound, does it? Yeah. All right, so Richie's idea is to play D5. And it's a pawn sack. If black doesn't take the pawn sack, then black's stuck playing this Benoni kind of structure in the center, which is risky. So black needs to do something, you know. Do you have to take the pawn? No, there's other options. You could maybe play something like B5 and try and sack a pawn yourself to get into a good you know, position in the center by distracting the C-pawn. And then, you know, white might not feel comfortable playing sort of like a weird Blumenfeldy position where it feels like Queen C2 is not going to be a precise move in the first few moves of a Blumenfeld, right? So now it feels like there's a lot of pressure on white here. So all kinds of possibilities. So Richie had somebody trade once and then not go for Knight D5 out of fear and prudence and so forth. They played Rook E8, which looks solid, trying not to let white set up a comfortable Benoni with E4. But now, compared to the Bishop G5 Nimzo, Richie has maybe a pleasant version of the Bishop G5 Nimzo here. I would think black's main idea would be to just play H6 immediately here. And then I'm not sure if white has a big improvement on the normal lines. Hey, Acratic. Good morning, George. It's not super late for me yet, Acratic, because I've been spending the summer in Hawaii. For George, it's Saturday morning. We suspect George of being in England, along with Richie and others. For me, it's Friday night still. Yeah. Yeah, cool. I didn't assume that because you move around a lot, but let's see what Richie had planned if black took the pawn. Idea was that then you get to play e4 because the knight's left f6. If the knight takes on c3, that looks like a big tempo to give white with pawn takes. I guess if we retreat, we're also giving a tempo, so who's to say? This looks very plausible, Richie. Okay, I'm going to try this move first for black. What would you do there? I mean, basically, if you can get any version of, bishop c4 and you castle kingside and then bishop f4, you just have a very free position, great compensation. It's just scary for black. Okay, and you were planning bishop c4. Yep. I guess you're going to sacrifice the rook on a1, huh? So we're going to get something like this. Should I play d5 or rook e4 or what? I tried playing a Blitz game, late night Blitz, and my computer couldn't process the moves fast enough. My computer barely counts as a computer. It's really bad. What were you expecting here, Richie? Rook e4, d5, queen f6, bishop d2 doesn't really seem to help black. I imagine you were looking at rook e4, right? That's the first thing to calculate, yeah. D5. Wow, someone else from the chess dojo is still up? I mean, I would think that Kosti would be the most likely. I mean, that Jesse would be the most likely to be up at 4 or 5 a.m., having already slept, like an old man who goes to bed at 8. But you talk like Kostya, so Jesse wouldn't say, wow, the moves were too hot. Okay, it's Kostya if you landed in LA. All right, so Richie's main line, rook e4. I mean, these moves are hot, it's true, but my computer is dying even without moves. So, probably nothing wrong with bishop d2. And now it's time for white to make some threats. You could castle, but then after bishop f6, you might wish you'd played knight g5 to begin with. Black's got 3 crummy pawns, and white has 3 raging pieces. This looks like no contest after knight g5, Richie. I think black's dead as a doornail or a dormouse. Yeah, that's it. Completely dead. So maybe there's some question of d5. Your simple approach would be to take the bishop. And then against rook e4 check, you bring back your bishop and you're up a piece. Right? Does black really believe that they're going to sack a piece against you here with... No, they're not. So they're trying to take here. And then I guess you just castle. And, it looks pretty fun for white. You might have to play down a pawn for a bit, but you know, you got pretty free pieces, a touch of development lead, opposite colored bishops. I could see white coming out well here, but I wouldn't 100% guarantee it. It's close enough to real that I can't promise that it's real or too optimistic. You know, it's right there on that line. You know, Acratic says black's lagging in development, but not by that much, right? It's black's move here. If they don't care about this pawn on b4 and they just play something like, I don't know, knight c6, or I don't know, if black plays bishop g4, do we have a good move for the knight? So we probably don't want black to just take here. Right, so if we imagine like knight c6, there's a good chance black's okay as well. And then this move here, I don't know if you're priced into knight g5, but that starts to feel a little dangly, right? A little bit like we're just hoping. If we had the tempo to play queen c4, maybe we'd start bothering black, but knight d2, bishop e2, I can't imagine you justifying this. Whatever you're going to do next, I don't believe in it after bishop e2. No, but you're giving black too many tempi, right? Like, who's ahead in development here? Black's absolutely winning. I agree, Acratic. You can't let me do this bishop e2 d3 thing, all with tempis. Because like I'm ahead in development and I'm up a pawn. Yeah, if you go queen b7, then you're going to lose a rook to this roaming knight. There's no way you're going to avoid losing one of these. And if you come backwards, there's a million things I could do, but I'll just play something really, really simple for you. Queen d4. I mean, your dream scenario is this, and I trade queens and play b5, right? And I might have better than queen d4, maybe knight d4 anyway. This is the problem, is that black's ahead in development. You know. I could defend my pawn with queen d5. That's a bad idea. Alternatives after d5. This would be the obvious move. I think black's going to do this, much as they want the rook. I'm really worried for white here. You see my mouse hovering here. But there is this. And on queen f6, bishop d2, again e3, there's queen h7. I don't know. But suppose I finally played a non-tempo move. By what rationale would white be okay here? They're temporarily down 2 pawns and they're not ahead in development. If they go knight e4, bishop f5 looks risky. If they don't go knight e4, then it looks like black will play bishop f5 and the knight on g5 will just, I don't know what it'll do. That looks borderline losing. My suspicion, honestly, is that d5 is too good here, Richie. Okay, bishop e2 takes, knight g5, bishop a5, castles. Alright. So bishop f5, bishop c4, bishop g6. White's 2 pawns down, they got a lot to prove. If f3, e3 hits the queen and the knight, forces knight e4. Maybe that's not the end of the world. F3 is quite sneaky. All right, I wanted to play f5, and after 2 minutes of spinning my wheels, I thought of just stepping out of the way. Bishop f7. Do you have me here somehow and I just don't see it? This looks like nothing. Bishop e3. This is joking, right? Q1. I don't believe. I think think we have to recognize how implausible this is. Bishop d3 here, and then pawn takes pawn. It's unlikely to absorb a d5 move from black with tempo and come out well, right? Like realistically, if you put your bishop on c4 and black's able to play d5, then you've done something wrong. So let's not play bishop here. Maybe here. Bad sign again. Pretty strong d5 from black. I'm not sure, Nicolalloy. I'm not much of like a visual art person because I have, I guess, hypophantasia. I have an almost non-existent mind's eye. So I don't really know what things look like. But I like literature, which is a kind of art. You know, I like music, I like writing. Yeah, it's very instructive, Richie, right? Because you can see which moves look like they may or may not be critical moves, right? And here, this rook e8 move is very tricky. We really need the right move for white. And you can see I'm going to give up relatively quickly as soon as I get a feeling like, oh, this move hit too hard from black, you know? Like, if they hit this move, it can't be working for white. This move's not completely implausible. Bishop e2. So I'm going to try that. Knight here. Again, I'm not going to try bishop d3, d5 kind of lines. So I'm going to try this move. Back into the center we go, maybe? This looks like exactly what you want, right? Rook d1. You can always bring your bishop out again to c4 or d3 later. Just general discomfort for all the black pieces. Maybe I should trade this stupid bishop, right? Instead of keeping it and spending a tempo tucking it on a5 uselessly. Knight here. It's not super easy to find the right approach for white here, but I think, for example, this line does everything white wants. And if this guy has to back off, now we can just come back and hold it together. And white is good. You think we could immediately go bishop c4? Oh, and then just queen h7. Yeah, I like this too. This looks very plausible, Richie. Right? You prevent any retreats, and then... Or you could have gone knight g5 and the king couldn't retreat also, huh? I mean, it looks very plausible. Very plausible. I can't say 100% guaranteed to work, but very, very likely. Okay, so the modest bishop e2. Here against some queen f6 type moves, you'll just have e5. All right, I'm going to try something different. Sorry, Richie. I meant knight c3, pawn c3, queen f6, e5. Noah Craddock, we're analyzing a variation of an opening that Richie invented on a board that happens to have sort of a Blitz game I played. Sure. It's a slightly weird line. This is not even the line from the Blitz game here, right? It's just a line that that Richie showed. So it's queen c2, Nimzo, castles, knight f3, c5. Now, normal looking move is pawn takes c5, I would think, or a3. And Richie came up with the idea of playing d5. He didn't mess up because he didn't know about e4. It was just a choice he made. And so here, black could take a pawn, right? And so that's what we're looking at now. Was, you know, how plausible is this pawn sack? You know, we can see the intention it comes from. This d5 move looks like it refutes the first line Richie wanted to play, which was bishop c4. But my instinct when you first showed me the position, Richie, was actually bishop e2 from the get-go. And this, we have not yet figured out what we think of it. So I'm trying knight c7. I'm not sure what you guys achieved here with f6 immediately. As black, I'm trying to play d5 and not lose another tempo to this e5 move. That tempo seems to be huge. That is kind of the point of the move queen c2, Acratic. I agree, is to threaten e4. Although secondarily, the point of queen c2 might be to play a3 and recapture on c3 without doubling your pawns. However, queen c2 followed by knight f3 followed by d5 does not lean on the obvious purposes of queen c2, right? So this line here, it's not obvious why queen c2 is the lead-in to this variation. After this, bishop c4 check. Oh, Richie, this is you're very obliging yourself here. By playing king h8 for black, you're being very obliging of yourself. You can't imagine for a moment that that's what I would do if you put yourself in black's shoes. You're not stupid. It's just these kind of blind spots, and this is why I emphasize this one to you like this, Richie. These kind of blind spots are very important to understand. They come from generally from various like psychological things here, right? Like I think this is, you want the variation to succeed so well that you're being more creative for white than for black, right? And for black, you're looking for chances to oblige white and give white the feeling you want. King h8, castles leaving the bishop on g5. That feels right to you. It completes the feeling and the narrative that you were, expecting and wanting. Right? So the mind is looking for chances to have things come together the way we imagined they would, so that we can then tell ourselves that we were right. But we've got to be equally savage and creative and tempo-oriented for both sides of this variation that we're analyzing, right? And when I played knight c7, I told you it's because I'm fighting for d5 as soon as possible, and not wanting to give up a tempo with this knight placed here. Not 100% nothing Acratic, because d5 is associated with following up with e4. So he is still trying to play e4 after d5. Nothing is strong, but it's not the most obvious. The most obvious application of queen c2 would be a3 or e4 on move 5. That, I think that we can agree on. Let's say on knight c7 that you castle. Very logical move, right? Now, let's say black plays d5. Here you could consider like the idea of stranding that bishop, right? Maybe I should play bishop d3 to keep black from playing bishop f5. I don't know. But anyway, you can see the point of this position, right? There's like a little feeling of initiative for white with bishop c4 or d3, knight g5 and stuff. There's also the idea of this bishop just being weird here. And maybe a drop of a development lead. Oh, okay. Queen f5 is no problem because then we go bishop d3, right? I don't know exactly. But it feels... It's hard to tell who's like better or worse. And if I trade here first, maybe queen c3 going after this pawn. I feel like I have to take this one to stay ahead, but I don't like moving my rook here. Well, I guess black's up a pawn and white has to prove it. Okay. I'm kind of curious now, Richie, to check some of my conclusions against a computer. How do you feel? How do you feel about me checking some of our analysis? I'm just gonna have to go to bed soon, and when I've just done a bunch of thinking, this is my best chance to compare my thinking with the computers. So here, knight f3, c5. Okay, so my computer says, so going back here, this is where we really get into your thing, Richie, right? My computer says that taking on c5 and a3 are the two best moves for white, which are the two moves that I considered, that just popped into my head as being normal for this series of moves. So d5. Let's see if it wants to take the pawn sack or not, huh? Yeah, it does want to take it. Greedy, greedy computer. And it looks like we got something wrong. Takes, 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 e4. It actually wants to trade on c3, which was your dream. It's not liking rook e8 that much immediately. But after rook e8, it says the only move for white, Richie, is bishop e2. So that instinct we had right. And then it says black should trade on c3 maybe, or play knight b6 is slightly better than knight c7 because it stops bishop c4. Knight c7 it doesn't like so much. It doesn't like knight c7 so much. But why is it okay to trade? Okay, so look at this variation, Richie. It trades here, for example, and then plays that same move, knight b6. So that you won't have bishop c4 for white. And that just reduces the aggression coming at black. Is there still some compensation for white? Yes, right? You got the bishop pair. You got the pawn on e4 giving you a little space. A rook on d1 will be nice. So the computer doesn't say you're down a pawn. It says you're down a quarter of a pawn. But this is like not an easy move to find for black, this knight b6 consideration. Acratic doesn't understand my knight c7 instinct. So obviously my knight c7 instinct was the wrong instinct, right? But so I don't know if it's of any use to tell you what instinct is not a good instinct or whatever. But I was thinking that with knight c7, when I played d5, e5, my knight would have the option to move back towards the game through e6. And I basically didn't consider knight b6 because the knight is sidelined there. It's not going to do anything further. It's just stuck there. And really, it's just stopping white from playing a big move with bishop c4. But the knight on b6, it can't go anywhere from there. So that's why it wasn't even on my radar. I wouldn't even consider this move, I don't think, in a tournament game. Because it can't go to d5, it can't go to c4, it can't go to a4. I'm not really interested in knight c8. And d7 is just a tangle square. I understand after d5, e5, it could maybe go through knight d7. But all my pieces need to go through d7. And as Richie says, like if the knight happened to be good here, it's always a target for this expansion, which goes very well with, semi-open file pressure. So my instincts just didn't even mention knight b6 as a move to me. Morning, Chess Quack. Good day to you. But I guess that's the key, Richie. It's just like keeping this bishop off of c4 really tames white's situation. Now, that bishop e2 move is so good that the computer thinks black shouldn't even play rook e8, which this is going to be a little bit weird to figure out why it thinks you should just take right away here. Let's see it. Did you play a lot of Ilyushin at some point in your life? Because that's basically known as a bad square for the knight. Like I've been explained that the move e5 is good for white on move 2 because the knight on b6 is badly placed. So having seen the Ilyushin does not make me want to play knight b6. Like I've heard that's basically white's entire advantage in the Ilyushin is that the knight's bad on b6. We just keep the piece. Retreat a bit. Say bishop c4 for white. I mean, this position just looks plausible for, totally plausible for white, this version of the pawn sack, Richie. This is like exactly what I would have thought you wanted, basically. But basically the computer's saying black could even just do something like d6, bishop g5, queen e8, castles, bishop e6, and you don't have full compensation. That's that like horrible part where, computer-like reality comes into our free-flowing feeling. Before computers were so strong, human players of my generation, we all looked at stuff like this and thought like, I just feel, it just feels like white's got stuff. It just feels tough for black. Feels, free-flowing and good and clean for white. But a computer will say that black is, a tiny bit better. In some ways, it's a shame that the mystique of some position dissipated with computers, Richie. Yeah, but they've also introduced us to other positions and ideas that can be super cool. So the verdict's not yet in. The computer's giving us so much new stuff to study. So I don't know. I mean, I did like that people really had to think for themselves and dig for ideas. And now someone can just like check on the computer and say like in 5 seconds, yeah, your whole opening's wrong. I don't know. It's too late at night for me to say anything really cogent on such a complicated question of whether the computers are increasing or decreasing mystique or teaching us cool things or so forth. I'm interested in everything, right, Richie? So that's where it comes from. It's an interesting idea. Your idea is like reminiscent of how White can play in the Blindfold, right? Because I once got to play a team game with John Bartholomew as my teammate. And how does it go? Is this the Blumenfeld? I'm trying to get to the Blumenfeld. So, supposing that this is the Blumenfeld, I think John may have played something insane, like here, like he told me to try this line in our game, which I hadn't learned before, something like this. And it was a similar kind of like free-flowing thing where black wins our pawns. C4, E6, knight F3, that's right. That's how they normally get it at Craddock, thank you. That's why I was like slightly confused there. Yeah, he showed me some gambit like this. This is totally like your thing, right? Like White's just not even caring. They're just like, whatever, my stuff will come out when it comes out. You know, something like here and here. I don't know, back here. Just castle. You know, this kind of a feel to it, right? And when you're doing it, it's similar, right? It's these kind of... Well, because you're playing a quick d5, you're getting these structures. It's also done in the Queen's Indian, right? There's some Queen's Indian lines with that d5 pawn sack. Several Queen's Indian lines. Some of them a Craddock will remember with Queen c2. Right? There's some Queen's Indian lines with like Bishop a6, Queen c2, Black plays c5, and then White plays d5 even though the pawn's straight up hanging. We'll see how illogical a Craddock thinks this is. Does White go g3 in this line? And then something like here, 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 and here. Yeah? Is this like a... I associate this with maybe Topalov. This is Bishop a6, the Queen's on c2, and White plays d5. So again, you know, does Queen c2 like help with this d5 move? Does it make sense? Well, maybe, maybe not, but the idea is partly that, you know, we have e4 coming. b6, is it g3? Bishop a6, Queen c2. I think it might be this. And then like takes, knight right here. White might even do something crazy like this. And then if you look at a position like this is very much like what Richie just came up with, right? In terms of structure, right? It's these weak squares here, some freedom of movement for the pieces. Then in the bishop b7 lines, there's also the ancient pawn sack, which I was just like thrilled when I learned about it. And I think I tried it once in a tournament game. Let's see if I can recollect how it goes. Just straight up d5 like this, maybe. And then they play here. Here. I might have this wrong, folks. I haven't been studying openings in a long time. There was like, I think there was a gambit like this that was popular already in maybe the 70s. So this kind of idea has been known for a long time. This is like a super ancient version of this kind of thing, and in this one, black's usually able to like break with d5, and white still has compensation of some sort just with the pieces. So, hey Omid, how are you doing? Yeah. So I don't know how much inspiration you drew from these lines, Richie. But this concept of playing basically without the D pawn, and then while black's taking the D pawn, of course, you're at least then able to play E4. This concept's been around, you know, for 50 years. But I think the computers probably have shown some of them to not quite be good enough. Some versions of these, right? Yeah. All right. High time that I get myself ready for bed. Thanks for the cool line, Richie. And I will take off. Actually, just because it was super cool, Acratic, I'll show you the opening of this game before I ran out of time. This thing here, this opening I played basically perfectly for black. So it's very... I don't know how well you know this particular opening. For a long time, I didn't know much about whatever it's called, bishop g5 on move 2, because it's not a main line, you know, and I started with Sicilians and Queen's Gambits and stuff like that. This position here, Trumpowski maybe, yeah. This position here, my opponent plays a major mistake with g3. It's a small little move, but a major mistake. Okay, yeah, so apparently Trumpowski, bishop g5, right? And yeah, I don't know. I don't really play d5 normally. I was just playing random moves. But I've seen the structure, right? And I understand the goal that white really needs to play c4. And so white plays a move here. This move's bad because it loses time, right? The bishop on f1 is already supporting c4. It is good for white to block the dark squares with the pawn chain, right? So that this guy won't become a problem. But this g3 move is just slow, right? Development-wise, compared to c4 and bringing the bishop out from f1. So it's enough that with really precise play, black can get the advantage. And so here, h5. If c4, I'm taking, but I'm not playing b5. I'm taking. and then just developing pieces. H5, black's already better. We checked with the computer after the game. H4 to stop it. There's other options for white, but this is one of the best options. And now, very important move, bishop g4, right here. Yeah, I'll say about this g3 move. If you play c4 and black doesn't trade off on c4, and they try some version of, I don't know, bishop b4 check, knight c3, castles, you know, pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5. If you ever get into these structures, white can basically win by playing knight e2, g3, bishop g2. So now g3 is good because c4 has been achieved quickly. Yeah, this is like very bad. Basically, the pawn's already dead, and you just have to already be thinking like, what position do I ever have enough play or something? Queen d5 would be an improvement. Yes, Richie. I was just kind of cheating because I wanted to show an idea. Okay, so there are positions where g3 gets played, right? But it's if black doesn't trade off on c4 quickly, and they try to like just play the isolated d5 pawn because they don't know. Once you've played ef6, you've given up on the d5 square. That's what you need to know, is you've already given up on the d5 square when you played ef6. So don't try to hold a square that you've already conceded, right? That square's gone if white comes for it. c6, it makes it look like you're going to hold it, but you're not. Okay, so I have to get to bed, so I'll go a little faster. So h5 with the idea of h4, h3. White can also play knight f3 as well as h4, but either way they're worse. So now bishop g4, very, very important here. Because this is the moment where if white plays knight f3, you can play f5, and they can't untangle the knight and queen fast enough to threaten f3 trapping your bishop. And so if they go knight f3 here, you're going to be able to go f5 and either transfer your knight all the way to e4 or play f4 as a pawn sack. And this is like a huge idea for black, is just give away the pawn on f4, and then you're just going to get access to some dark squares at some point. Same thing if they go bishop f3. You play f5. They can't disentangle and play this f3 move against you. So you get to play this with your bishop out here, and they can't prevent like the f4, g5 breaks at some point. Good, Acratic. The moment that they overprotected f4, you started eyeing a pawn sack on the very square that they're trying to say they're controlling, right? Because they're desperate to control the square. So you're like, okay, well, can I do it anyway? So every move has its disadvantage. Obviously, f3, bishop takes g3 check is the worst. So knight e2. So now I can't play f5 because f3 is still too good. So I have to do a little more development. Queen e7. Important move, coordinating stuff. White didn't like c4, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop check. And they have to either retreat the knight or play king f1, and obviously black's comfortable. But they made things worse for themselves by trying to prepare c4 with b3. I castle. And this is all just getting worse and worse for white the more they try to make it perfect. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to hold their whole structure. They can't castle, by the way. This is like the terrifying thing for white. If they castle g5, and black's hugely better. You know, that's part of the concession of knight on e2 instead of f3. That they can't hold the h4 square without the rook. So there'd be, I don't know exactly when they could castle or if they ever could, but it's very hard for white to castle safely. So they're going for c4 anyway. The computer, by the way, suggested some like insane thing here at first. It said the best line for black was like knight b6, making c4 hard for white, and then b3. This line just blew my mind. The computer thought this was best until I showed it my plan, because it hadn't yet foreseen what the point of my plan was. But it wanted to do this to hold that square, which you can't even really hold, and then eventually maybe you give it up and go knight f5 and sack a piece. I don't know. But queen e7, I've got a very, very clear plan, which is I'm coordinating all my pieces. I'm getting e8 free for the rooks, but I just want to sack bishop g3, f g3, queen e3. And then everything about white's position looks kind of stupid. Right? And the point is, if they ever castle, I have g5. So I need some kind of plan of what I'm doing if they don't castle, right? And what they're going for is going to be c4, finally. I mean, that's the main plan for white. And then, of course, it's risky that I put my king on this side of the board. The computer suggested I could play a plan of g6, king f8, king g7 as well as being interesting. Because I need the rook over here for g5 maybe. And then this rook has access to e8. But I think I did this one right. And the thing is, the computer didn't see that against c4. This is not like the strongest computer, it's just the chess.com computer. When I showed it the game afterwards, it didn't see that I would be able to refute c4 with bishop takes g3. And after I showed it the variation in the game, then it went back and said that this line was the best for black. So c4 takes. It's very important to trade on c4 before sacking on g3. I had a big think about this. And also, by the way, this is a fascinating move, a theme we talked about today. Sometimes you can do this. You just give d5 by surprise when they can't avoid giving you d4. But okay, very clear solution here. And just take. And black is better. Here I made a big mistake. Queen e7, correct, is queen a3. Because now you can take on e2 and the queen can't recapture. And against knight h2, which is white's main groveling move, you can take the g3 pawn. I just kind of panicked and played the wrong move here. But anyway, up to here is very, very instructive that this is a winning position for black, and just how badly white's g3 move gets punished. So just sharing that with you because it took me a long time to have any idea of how to handle this this e takes f6 d5 position. For the longest time I was like, oh my god, it's really hard to sink my teeth into it. You know, like that you know, b4 e5, bishop b2, bishop takes b4, bishop takes e5, how that's supposed to be good for black. But you have to be a very, very good player to understand why on earth that would be good for black and or how to play it as black. Right? I mean, if you were like under 2,000 players, I mean, there'd be no reason white shouldn't play that line because black would just not know what to do. They put the knight on c6, blocking the c7 pawn, and castle, rook e8, d5. They're somehow playing in the center, but without a real pawn center. And white's got more center pawns. It's just like a really weird thing, right? And this thing here too for me, this ef6 followed by dc4, conceding the center, white looking healthy. For the longest time, I just understand, like, you know, where do I put my pieces? What's my plan? What am I doing? So I thought that would be the right level of tidbit to share with you. And now I'm off to bed. Have a great day, everybody in England and all your other time zones where you guys are already on Saturday. And I will see you next time.